Katie Gibbs, University Women. I'd like to welcome you to the Candidates Forum that we're putting on once again tonight on behalf of the American Association of University Women, the Mendocino Women's Political Coalition, and the Ukiah Daily Journal. Thank you all for coming. We've presented these forums for more than 25 years to help you choose the candidate who will do the best job leading our county. We know you will vote, but please encourage everyone around you to vote too. Our moderator is Marianne Bilbrook. She will explain the details about how it works for candidates.
Thank you, Katie, and welcome everyone. As Katie said, we are going to be presenting this evening the candidates for first district supervisor. There are 4 of them. We're going to devote our first 15 minutes to hearing from Chief Doug Hutchison, who is the fire chief of the Ukiah Valley Fire District, and he is going to explain measures D and E on the countywide measures on the ballot, having to do with extending the transient occupancy tax to the campgrounds with the funds to be distributed to county fire districts.
Good evening, thank you for having me. So as she explained, the county's put forth 2 measures, D and E, to assist the local fire districts with sustainable funding. One of the things that is very challenging, particularly for the small districts, is to have sustainable funding based on the way taxation works in the state of California. So one of the hopes is although this is not by any means going to really patch all the holes for the fire districts, for many it will be really truly a godsend, the amount of money that we're talking about. So what's proposed and why it was proposed the way it is Measure D would be a general sales tax, essentially like the transient occupancy tax put on hotel and motel rooms now, with the second advisory measure, Measure E, where the public can advise that 100% of the funds collected from that would go to the fire districts in Mendocino County. Currently, the private campgrounds, of which I believe there are 10 within the county, do not pay the transient occupancy tax. So this was identified as an additional revenue source that could be made up without placing additional burdens on those that are already paying the transient occupancy tax. The county estimates that the revenue could approach $1 million, which would be split between all the fire districts within the county, which there's 20 or so. The formula for that basically breaks down that 75% would be evenly distributed. So each fire district would get a check for a certain amount, regardless of their size. So, for instance, the Ukiah Valley Fire District, which is one of the larger fire districts in the county, would not receive more than, say, Albion River, who would get the exact same amount that they do. The remaining 25% would be allocated to the County Fire Chiefs Association for them to decide if there was a greater need in a particular area that year. So even though the districts will be able to look at their given amount year after year and be able to budget for that, if they have a greater need for some catastrophic replacement of a piece of equipment or need to upgrade to a new standard, there will be additional funds that the fire chiefs can decide, okay, where do those additional funds go? Where's the greatest need this year? That's basically it in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you can.
How much in the way of revenue do you expect from Measure D?
As I said, the county's estimates are approximately $1 million per year. So if you divide that by the 20 fire districts, you're looking at roughly $37,000 per year of the equal amount, the 75%. The remaining $250,000, as I said, will be split or put to whatever the greatest need is determined by the Fire Chiefs Association was for that particular year.
And does that include, does that association include all the fire chiefs?
Yes.
Are there any downsides to this that you will see? from the county's goal?
Me personally, no. One of the nice things is that this really does capture a lot of the tourist industry, and I know that particularly the rural districts, particularly on the coast, have a great impact from the tourist industry. Their base population that is there year-round may be very small, but obviously during certain times of the year they get a lot of influx of people. That creates a great need for training for things like water rescue, cliff rescue, and gives them more opportunities to have to use those skills because of the influx of those out-of-town folks. And this would directly tax some of those people to help pay for the services that they would receive on the coast.
Is there any organized opposition to these
Not that I'm aware of.
measures that you're aware of?
The biggest thing is we want to get the information out there because we know people are going to start receiving absentee ballots here very soon. And we don't want to miss the boat on getting information to people who are going to vote early before they really have a chance to consider all the facts.
When will it go into effect?
That would depend on when it's fully enacted, but probably within the next year, once they can get the tax roll certified. It should be in effect next fiscal year.
I'm not getting any more questions for Hutchison. So thank you so much. Each of you will have 1 minute to make an opening statement, and that will be followed by questions, minute answer those questions, etc. I'll rotate the order that the questions get asked. And I will start with his hand. That means James Green.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'd first like to thank the Mendocino Women's Political Coalition for having us here tonight. I'd like to thank the audience for coming out as well. And I wanted to take a minute to acknowledge my fellow candidates for keeping this an issues-oriented campaign. None of us hate each other. We're not enemies. We're just 4 gentlemen competing for an important job, a job that requires your trust, because this job is all about you, the people of Mendocino County. I'm a father, a husband, and a graduate of California State University, Long Beach. I'm also serving the community as a Rotarian, and I'm very proud of that. My wife is doing her part. She's Dr. Kristen Laporte, an OBGYN at the Care for Her clinic here in Ukiah, providing excellent medical care for the women of Mendocino County. The top issues I think that the county needs to address are securing the Potter Valley Water Project, fire threat and safety awareness, housing, homelessness and mental illness, and county infrastructure as it relates to public safety. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Glenn Labordi. We live in a really beautiful environment in the First District, and we have to protect it. We also have to protect each other, too, because we are occasionally having some really major challenges in the form of forest fires, floods, heat waves, and having the tools to protect each other, the real basic things, public safety, and good infrastructure like roads so we can get in and out in any weather or in any condition or something that I support and will work for you on. So I've spent the last 32 years as a University of California farm advisor, helping people grow crops, gardens, landscapes, and plants. And I have a long history of collaboration and working with people successfully. In addition to that, I served on the Ukiah Parks and Rec Commission, and also I was a trustee for the Ukiah Unified School District, so I'm totally committed to working in the public sector and helping people.
I like you two so far. My name is John Kennedy. Thank you for coming and thank you for hosting this forum. My wife Tiffany and my 1-year-old son Connor and I moved to Mendocino County almost 22 years ago. We have since created 2 more, Carter and Aaron. 2008, we decided to move up to the mountains to be closer to our parents. And one thing led to another, and I was elected county supervisor in Plumas County. Near the end of the term, we decided to move back to Mendocino County. It was a good decision for many reasons. Professionally, it was also the most difficult decision I've ever made in my life. I'm running because I missed the job. I missed the job because it was the most challenging thing I've ever done. It was the most challenging thing I've ever done because the decisions we had to make as a board affected so many people. and you gotta get it right. So here in Mendocino County, the decisions we make effectively or essentially affect 90,000 lives. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to do what I love doing. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is John Sekowitz. I want to thank everyone for coming. An informed electorate is the cornerstone of any democracy. I want to thank our sponsors for making this happen. I also have respect for each one of my fellow candidates. It's been a positive campaign up to date and an issues-oriented campaign. I moved to Mendocino County 20 years ago. I've worked for the Sheriff's Office, been on the grand jury 3 years. I've served on the County Retirement Board for 5 years and served on the successor agency to the County's Redevelopment Authority. I've followed 25 years on Wall Street, both onshore and offshore, and I earned my BA and MA in Johns Hopkins. I've been involved in the cannabis industry for the last 20 years, and I imagine a good number of questions tonight will come about that, come from that subject of interest. I am very much in favor of getting the county into a public-private partnership to develop a supply chain company to earn new tax revenues for our much-needed services. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Here's the first question from the audience, and I will start this with Mr. Gordy. What issues are unique to your district? Does your loyalty lie with your district or with the entire county?
Well, with my district, of course. No, it's also with the county because this job is more about than just your district. So I think the biggest challenge facing our district would be water in terms of infrastructure and public safety in terms of services. So the water issue with Potter Valley project up for renewal and trying to figure out how we're going to structure that with other stakeholders is going to be something that will really dominate this first 4 years of whoever is elected. Additionally, there's the Sustainable Groundwater Management Program, which I'm involved with as kind of the leader of the technical advisory committee for that program. And finally, the water quality from irrigated agriculture. This is not just about agriculture too, it's also about residential, because when you look at the district, Redwood Valley in particular has some water security issues, so there's a lot to unpack in that subject.
Thank you. Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, first part of the question first. Potter Valley project is one of the leading issues in our district for some of the same reasons you're probably going to hear from everyone else. We need to make sure that we advocate. The county isn't exactly able to afford to carry on that project, and the only special districts the county has is lighting districts. So we need to make sure that we advocate to continue the hard work being done by Jan Pauley and the rest to continue the water flow. The other issue in the district is fire recovery. A lot of people don't realize it's been 2 years. There's still 100 or so people out there who are still not in their homes. And we do have a property tax issue there, so we can get the homes rebuilt and get that revenue back into the coffers. As for loyalty to the district and the county, your number one job is the county. You just get elected by the district. Sometimes you have to make decisions that aren't great for your district, but better for the county. So the loyalty, your job is to represent the county. But of course, we don't ignore the issues of our district as well. Thanks.
Mr. Sekowitz.
Probably the number one issue for the district is water, and I very much support Congressman Jared Huffman's two-basin solution for the Potter Valley project. I think that is well in hand with the Inland Water Commission. I think wildfire is probably the second issue, and emergency readiness needs to be supported by improvements in equipment and technology to both our telecommunications and information technology emergency readiness. Cannabis is a huge issue, of course, particularly in the Potter Valley, Redwood Valley area. Ukiah has made numerous inroads into that area, and I think our cannabis farmers could do much better. Countywide homelessness is an issue, and I think our county can seek more public guardianships for the seriously mentally ill. and more Laura Law interventions for our homeless who cannot take care of themselves. Thank you.
Mr. Green?
Well, I think we're going to be before water clearly is an issue, the highest priority. $100 million water project. Now, I don't want to drown anybody in statistics, so we'll just keep it topical. Hundreds of millions of dollars in agriculture, 16 million, see how I'm doing. Millions of dollars in tax revenue, as well as thousands of jobs. We must secure it. It would be financially devastating if we don't. Plus, I can't imagine what our communities would look like without Lake Pillsbury and Lake Mendocino. Those are recreational and wildlife havens for all of us.
Thank you.
Regarding the loyalties, I think John Kennedy said it best. Every decision we make has to reflect the well wishes of the entire family.
Thank you. A little follow-up question, since you all mentioned water. Can you give just a very short explanation of the Potter Valley water project, and what is the role of Mendocino County in that project? Mr. Kennedy.
The role of the county, in a lot of cases, is to defend the county against the state and the feds. Okay, in this case, you're not really, you're working collaboratively with the state and the feds, mostly the feds. PG&E, I sent a message to a buddy at PG&E today and said, can you make my life easier and just keep that project going? He said no, because then the bankrupting a bankrupt company. The role for the county is to continue advocating and working with the partners to make sure that water flow continues, not minimized, and protect the fisheries. The project, the two-basin system, I'm not sure if it's the best thing, but if it's the only thing that continues the water, I'm not sure about pumping water back up and raising the dam, the Coyote Dam, but those are some of the options out there. But the county's role is to do what we can to continue the water flow in whatever capacity is possible.
Mr. Sacklett?
Well, clearly the project involves a balance. It involves the balance of protecting our fisheries, the salmon, the steelhead trout migration routes, and also protecting our farmers and ranchers' access to cheap water. This is a balancing act, but again, I believe that Congressman Huffman has taken a real leadership position in the project. The role of the county is to protect the county's interests. As everyone in this room knows, our county pretty much gave away a large part of our watershed in the late 1950s when the dams were built and when Lake Mendocino was built. I think to use a corporate phrase, I think we need to claw back a lot of those rights. Agriculture is a cornerstone of our local economy. Cannabis agriculture is a growing part of that economy, and we need to claw back those water rights and to support our farmers. Thank you.
Mr. Green?
Well, to correct one point, the water isn't just cheap, it's been free. The county's role is to make sure our interests are protected. Farmers, agriculturalists, and residential. 600,000 people are depending on this water. I've been attending the Inland Water and Power Commission meetings to see exactly where we are in this fight. Now, the county's joined a partnership. The Inland Water and Power Commission has joined a partnership. Humboldt County's on board, Sonoma Water's on board, Cal Trout. We're all forming an entity. And really what this comes down to is money. We're talking about feasibility studies. We're talking about several millions of dollars to finish this project, to relicense it. And that's part of the county's role, is to make sure all this is coordinated. And I give a lot of thanks, as we all do, to Janet Pauley for spearheading this effort.
Mr. McGordy?
Mendocino County will have to take a leadership role, and the Board of Supervisors are going to have to play a very active part in that, because it will take compromise, it will take probably some sort of a structure to represent all the stakeholders formed after a joint powers authority or something like that. We don't know yet. We don't really know what all of the parameters are that we're going to have to address. We don't know the cost. This is something that's going to take some real sophistication and some real dedication to on the part of the Board of Supervisors, and specifically someone from the First District. It's the largest irrigated agriculture district in Mendocino County. It's where most of our irrigated ground is. But in addition to that, it's where a lot of people live that are dependent on groundwater, which is also part of the system that's connected. So that's something that we have to take into mind, is the connectedness of everything in Mendocino County with the Russian River. And we are also talking about another watershed that's impaired, which is the Eel River watershed, which is also part of our district. So there's really kind of two basins to be concerned with, and I think the other speakers have addressed that.
Thank you. Changing topics, so several questions here dealing with homeless situation. And the most direct one here is, tell us your plan to deal with the homeless.
Thank you for asking that question. When I was with the sheriff's office, I worked almost exclusively in Building 2, Wing 4. That is our administrative segregation unit. That's where our county houses our 5150 seriously mentally ill, as they're on their way through the court system to Patton Hospital, Napa Hospital, Tuscadero Hospital, or some other program. I work very closely with Dr. Doug Rosoff, a friend and a mentor, sadly now deceased, in the years that I worked in that unit. Our county needs to declare many more Lanterman Preacher Short conservatorships for the seriously mentally ill. We need to do many more Laura's Law interventions concerning the performance of Redwood Community Services. If elected supervisor, I would urge an independent financial audit of those contracts along with a mental health outcome study and wanting to know whether we're getting our money's worth, $20 million and millions more in Medi-Cal billings. Thank you.
Mr. Green.
What am I going to do about homeless? Okay, 60 seconds.
As a member of the board.
As a member of the board, well, first and foremost, I want to support the programs that are already in place and working. Of course, we need to pursue other community and housing solutions for this ever-growing problem. The Mendocino County Health and Human Services Agency Continuum of Care provides homeless resources. It does it with county money, and it does it with millions of dollars in grants. Relocating our homeless out of our rivers, out of our neighborhoods, and out of our business doorways is in everybody's best interest, because that's not where the help is. The help is in places like the Building Bridges Homeless Resource Center in Ukiah. It's a day-use shelter, it's an evening shelter during the winter, it provides housing resources and access to CalFresh and CalWorks, and so much more. Of course, we need to secure funding to make sure that the evening shelter is open year-round so the homeless continue to have a place to go. That's what I think. 60 seconds.
Mr.
The first thing to recognize is that homelessness is not a monolith. It's not one thing. There's actually multiple things, and we really have to have an assessment to guide people to the right services. Financial insecurity is a big one, where people just can't make the first and last month's rent plus a deposit. And assisting them finding placement into an affordable housing is something I think is important and can be done. There's people who need mental health services. There's people who are also have issues with substance abuse. They also have to be brought to the right places. It's going to take a public-private partnership to work through these things, and it's clear that we put a lot of money into it already. I think also creating housing stock in our county is critically important, because housing of all affordability is in short supply. So that's the other thing that I would support, is smart growth and trying to find solutions inside of existing areas with infrastructure and services.
Mr. Kennedy.
Solve homelessness in 60 seconds.
You've been asked that in every candidate's for.
First of all, if it doesn't make you a little bit sad to see it, you should check yourself. We probably could have saved several $1,000s by taking the market report and just copying what he did in all the other cities and just did the same thing here, because he has kind of the same answer to the problem. We are not short of any suggestions, recommendations, analysis, plans. The continuum of care here is working very hard in identifying more to why people are homeless and counting who's there and what to do to solve the problem. What we need to do is change our mindset. We need to stop talking so much about economic development and start talking about compassionomic development and wrap our minds around actually solving the problem together and quit coming from left and right and just nowhere ever getting in the middle. Thanks.
Mr. Green, I'm going to start with you then next. There are actually a couple of kind of follow-up questions to that subject. What are your thoughts on how the county and the Measure B committee have proceeded in implementing Measure B? What would be your priorities as to how the Measure B funds should be spent, and what steps should be taken and in what order? You can wrap up.
Well, Measure B has to fulfill its promise. We're talking about 5 years of $35 million. As we all know, a mentally ill patient it's not just a singularity, it affects the family around him. And often, too many times, a mentally ill patient has to be sent away for treatment. The county does not have the facilities here at the moment. Since the inception of the fund, we've been able to acquire a training facility and a sheriff's substation out in Redwood Valley. But the Kemper report, which is the guiding document for Measure B, also states that we need a psychiatric health facility, we need crisis residential treatment centers, and we need crisis stabilization units. To date, a plan to build those facilities has not been finalized, but the county is aware, the public is aware of how important it is to get this done. And I want to keep a close eye on it as it progresses.
Mr. McGordy?
So Measure B has an advisory committee, which is really important, that are focusing on how to implement all the things that Mr. Green just talked about. And and the Kemper report are two guiding lights, I think, that can help make decisions. But in the end, the Board of Supervisors has to be responsible for it. And I think it's really important to recognize that the way that the ordinance is structured, the Board of Supervisors makes the final decision. And they have to be involved. They can't just say, yeah, sure, whatever, we'll sign the paper. I mean, they need to take an active part in it. And it's something that has touched my life personally, having had someone with a mental health crisis. And the going through our system here in the county was just gut-wrenching. That's all I can tell you. The other thing that's got to be done in this process is it's got to be available to everybody, not just anyone who's on Medicare or Medi-Cal. It's got to be available with private insurance as well, so that we have local treatment for people who are having mental health issues.
Kennedy?
Yes. I was a supporter of Measure B, just like probably everyone here. Working on the mental health issues is one of the most dear things to me. When I was the county supervisor in Plymouth County, on several occasions I had to look families in the face where we had to admit that we failed their families. I have a nephew who's in the transitional age youth arena, and he's had some problems. And one of the worst things I had to do to protect him was to call my friend, who's the sheriff of Plymouth County, and have him arrested to make him safe. That is why we have Measure B, to get the sheriff's office and the correctional facility out of the business of handling folks who are temporarily 5150 or in more of a crisis arena. Just to repeat exactly what Glenn said and James said, that the county has to take an active role in making sure that the provisions of Measure B come forth as they are in the measure itself. And that's just the facilities.
Yes, thank you. We have a couple of supervisors in the room, Supervisor McCowan and Supervisor Heshek. And for the life of me, I don't know why they just don't put this on the agenda. Years later, millions of dollars later, why don't we have a PUF unit? When all of these candidates were interviewed by Sheriff Tom Ullman, former Sheriff Tom Ullman recently at Factory Pipe, it was the first question that came up. And of course, it's near and dear to the sheriff. He lost a brother to suicide. After all this time, we were just hiring an architect to develop blueprints for the psychiatric health facility. That's shameful. as supervisor, you have a moral, ethical, and legal obligation to put that on the agenda and to ask why. I think part of the problem has to do with the size of the committee. You have 20 or 30 people. We're a county of independent free thinkers. I don't think in a group of 20 or 30 people, you can get everyone to agree on the day of the week. Something needs to be done to make this a streamlined and efficient process.
Thank you. All right. Juvenile hall is expensive to run and houses only a few kids. What should the county do with juvenile hall? Mr. Jordan.
Well, this is something that is a topic that is somewhat controversial, and from a fiscal perspective, the county would love not to have to expend the amount of money that they do, which is well over $1 million to house a relatively small number of kids in crisis or trouble. But by the same token, the legal team of the county courts wants to have the facility available so that they don't have to be driving children back and forth for consultation and things associated with trials. So that's why it still remains open, and I think it's something that needs to be looked at. But I can't imagine us not having an arrangement that is any more convenient than what we have presently. And the thought of having to send kids out of county is something that a lot of, particularly court officers, would rather not do.
Mr. Kennedy.
You keep the probation juvenile hall, you keep it, and you figure out how. I was accused by many friends of probably being a good politician because I am a decent business person, so I know how to run the county like a business. Well, those people don't know what they're talking about. In some cases, you can't run a county like a business. You can't look at the numbers and say, we only have 5, it costs this much, it doesn't work. Sometimes there's a loss in certain sections of certain departments that provide essential services. There might be only 5 kids, 6 kids, those figures are kind of wrong. We serve more than that. But we have to determine every which way we can to continue the juvenile hall here, to keep the children here, or the juveniles, to make sure that they are close to family, whether that family is great or not. But we have to, it's a budgetary issue, but we need to make sure that we change our priorities to make sure that remains.
Mr. Sackless?
This is a difficult issue. The county grand jury looked at this very recently, and after a lot of discussion and deliberation, they advised the county to keep the juvenile hall open. That said, the census of kids in juvenile hall is about a half dozen to a dozen kids. And the juvenile hall is running a deficit of a couple of $1 million a year. So how do you balance these two things? I don't know what the deal breaker is. Maybe providing some temporary homeless shelter at juvenile hall is the deal breaker. Maybe we can do a conversion of part of juvenile hall into a temporary shelter facility. It'll be up to the next Board of Supervisors to discuss, and clearly this is going to involve the input of many people and many agencies and many families.
Mr. Green?
Well, I have no intention of sending any child out of county. That just seems completely inhumane. Some things cost money. Roads cost money, ambulance service costs money, emergency services cost money. This is one of those things that may cost money. Again, this is a humanitarian issue, and we could be creative. I'm sure we can look into this. I don't have the exact answer at the moment, but there's no way I would entertain any notion about sending kids out of county.
There has been discussion and criticism of the board to the effect that the CEO of the county runs the show and dominates the board. What is your assessment of this? Actually, one question that came up here lists all of the roles that the county CEO plays in the county and being head of many, many, many departments. So what, if anything, would you do to change the current dynamic in this regard, if you think it's wrong? So what, if anything, and what are your thoughts on this?
I think this question is mostly for John because he's been the biggest cast. Everyone else. Okay, CEO, CAO, whatever you want to call it. The job of governing is the buck stops here at the Board of Supervisors. Whether those notions are true or not, it doesn't matter to me. The future to me is more important than the past. So the Board of Supervisors should not give up their ability to keep control of things, but they don't need to micromanage. So I believe Carmel actually is a brilliant woman. She does a good job working. There could be flaws. I don't know. My job isn't to watch her all the time. My job right now is to get people back in their homes and to raise my family. And but we need to go ahead and just, I guess, start over when one of us get there and work to make things work. It's probably not as bad as what's perceived.
Mr. Sackwitz?
Oh, thank you so much.
Counterpoint.
Well, it's not a counterpoint exactly. I've lived in this county for 20 years. I've been a county employee. And when I was on the grand jury, part of my assignment was to attend Board of Supervisor meetings, of which the county CEO is an integral part. I know how she operates. She operates like a mafia boss. She has delegated almost nothing to the board. She develops the agenda. She hires and fires department heads. What she did to Barbara Howe, our public health director, is a disgrace in firing her for challenging her authority and then attempting to ruin her career with an affidavit for a restraining order that bordered on perjury. She has privatized mental health services. She has subsumed 3 other departments, information technology, risk management, and real estate management, into her department. We need a CAO form of government. The Board of Supervisors, as the grand jury has advised, needs to take back control of our county.
Ms. Green?
I've read the grand jury report. I also read CEO's response and the board's response. The CEO model versus the CAO model, they all have advantages. Well, excuse me, they both have advantages, they both have disadvantages. My campaign is issues oriented. When I get elected, I'm going to work with the other 4 supervisors, county council, and the CEO to help move the county forward. While there, if I determine that a change needs to be made to the org chart, I will work with the other supervisors to determine what that change should be and make a coordinated strategy for that. Thank you.
Mr. McGordy?
So I have a really unusual perspective, having served as a department head in the county. I'm currently one. University of California is our employer, but we're assigned to the county, and so we have to interact also with the CEO, and I've also interacted with the CAO. The CAO system, I think, has a lot to do with the personality in either position, and Mike Scannell was the boss when I first started. He was our CAO, and he was wonderful to work with. I think that the supervisors interacted more with the departments. They had a little more contact. And my experience now, coming back as department head, working under CEO, is that there's more of a firewall between the Board of Supervisors and the departments, and we don't really interact with them very much unless we're having some kind of particular problem or budgetary need. So, but I think it is true that no matter what, you've got to work with that person and be actively involved with whatever decision-making and whatever arrangement you make. The last thing is that, personnel evaluations are, of course, confidential, so we can't do an evaluation up here on her and make this employment decision tonight, so that's something we'll have to do when we find out.
Let's see. Sackwitz. What will you do to attract business and jobs to Mendocino County?
You know, I think cannabis is the great opportunity. It's a $1 billion economy in the 3 Emerald Triangles. But the vast majority of cannabis farmers are unpermitted. I would know because I've been involved in the industry for the last 20 years. I brought a little souvenir. This is something that the DEA left behind at a recent bust. You only get it from the DEA. It's a dragon breathing fire on a cannabis grow. Our county needs to be in the supply chain business. We need to be in the same business as Flow Canna, but as a private-public partnership with our farmers. We need to sell direct to consumer. We need to enable our cannabis farmers to sell direct to consumer. It's a $1 billion business, or else Flow Canna and their Wall Street investors would not be in that business.
Anything left in that bag?
How about later?
Mr. Green.
In reference to the economy, we have the Economic Development Finance Corporation, we have the Broadband Initiative, the West Business Development Center. All these need to be promoted to continue to have our local businesses thrive as well as attract new business. Beyond wine tours, we have a wonderful agricultural economy here. Camping, recreation. And let's talk about Lake Mendocino for a second. Lake Mendocino needs to be restored to a family-friendly place. We need clean, attractive campgrounds and day use centers to attract all sorts of recreational tourists from all around Northern California. Going to the Broadband Initiative, I think we need to continue to invest in that to make sure our economy grows. Housing. We can't grow industry without placing our workers. If we want to expand, we need to continue to promote housing. Thank you.
Mr. Gordon.
So going back to the days when Mike Scannell was CAO, he talked a lot about an investment mentality in the county. And at that time, we had an economic development officer. We had an overall economic development plan. And I agree with those principles that the county can take a role in saying, what is it exactly that we want to do? What do we have capacity for? And you've already heard some ideas from the other candidates. What I see, of course, is we do have a very interesting and well-stocked tourism business on the coast. I think that the center part of the county is a good place to shop, and we find that people are coming up from Cloverdale and from surrounding counties because it's easier to come here than to go to Santa Rosa. And promoting the interior part of the county not only for shopping and for medical services and things, but also tourism. And I agree with you, we really need to do something about Lake Mendocino because that's a wonderful asset that's sitting completely unutilized at the moment.
Mr. Kennedy.
I'm going to come straight from left field on this. So I believe the county has a role in economic development. It probably isn't the same as what a lot of people think. This signifies the budget book. There's about $300 million there. $270 million in health and human services and law enforcement. The priorities of the county lies in people. We're in the people business. The priorities of the county are essential services, delivering essential services to the citizens that need it in the county. The role that the county plays in economic development is to enhance and improve essential services, make our communities clean, healthy, and safe. The better we do at that, the better the private sector will do on their own. I've been in the private sector. The only thing government has really helped me do is remind me when my permits are due or the regulations that I've maybe violated or not violated. But the role of government is not to necessarily carve a path for private sector to be successful. They can do that on their own. The role of government is to improve essential services.
So just a little follow-up question there. It sounds like Mr. Gordy would say yes and Mr. Kennedy would say no, but should the county have a department of and or director of economic development? Mr. Kennedy Green?
I'm sorry, what was
Should the county have a department of economic development or a director of economic development?
Well, I think it goes without saying, the county plays a role. I mean, I respect Mr. Kennedy's statement, but the county does play a role. What do we have here? We have agriculture, we have tourism, we have a beautiful coastline, we have Lake Mendocino. To ignore those gems would be would not be beneficial for the county. So yes, I do believe we need some sort of budget that takes that into consideration.
Mr. Gordy?
Oh, yes, I definitely agree. We really need to build financial capacity here for tax base and for living wages. And the county can play a role in providing guiding infrastructure, because you're not going to have development, you're not going to have things happen unless there's a sewer system, unless there's water, unless there's roads, and unless there's something to put a thinking cap on about how our county's going to look and what our towns are going to look like. And there's certainly been tons of discussion over the 32 years that I've been here, and it needs to be heated.
I'm glad we got to expand on this same question for another minute. Those are essential services that you just pointed out. That's what the county role of the county is. The other thing that you can do in the county to help with the economic development is to make sure that you are creating less barriers for people who want to get building permits and do building and developing. That is needed. Let me just ask a question though. As we're talking about measures to raise funds for ambulance services, which is an essential service, not the job of the county, but it's an essential service and serve the same people. Fire services, they're lacking money. How do you take a chunk of money and start an economic development department when we're still wondering how we're going to get the ambulance services and fire? So I think it's a priority issue, and that creating an economic development department, in my opinion, does not rise above the other essential services like I mentioned.
Mr. Sapowitz?
Absolutely, yes. And it should not be part of the CEO's or the CEO's office. It should be its own department, standalone department. We need an Office of Economic Development, and right here in our county, we have an excellent candidate for the job. His name is Brett Schultz, and he is the Director of Building and Planning. Brett was the Director of the Redevelopment Authority in the city of Anaheim for 13 years. I think the guy's underemployed issuing permits for our county. I'd love to see Mr. Schultz direct an Office of Economic Development. And I'd like to see him start with the Cannabis Grant and Loan Advisory Committee, which is what Humboldt County has. They have something called Project Trellis. They have a local equity program, and it's a moneymaker. And they got it started with state funds. Brett's the guy for the job. Let's get her done.
Okay, next question. Cannabis has been mentioned as an economic driver in the county. And this question is, are there any ramifications, positive or negative, to the county's reputation and history as a region where growing and the use of marijuana is pervasive?
Well, our county kind of specializes in mind-altering substances between the wine industry and marijuana industry. Yeah, we have a reputation, and this is one of the things that's kind of sad for me, because, you know, we pay a lot in the county on both sides, but both in law enforcement and both in people who developed this amazing agronomy around this crop and figured out how to take essentially what was a fiber and seed crop and turn it into a high THC, high cannabinoid content plant. And so the reputation is there, and what you do with it, of course, is the next step. And I personally think of cannabis as an agricultural crop. It should be licensed, it should be regulated, it should be taxed, it should be done in a way that it's really clear what the rules are, what the ground rules are, and it's part of our culture. And I would also like to see something like we have in the wine industry, where small producers have a different set of rules where they can direct sell and produce with less taxes.
Ms. Kennedy?
So I'm gonna come back to the perspective as the county supervisor and the role in this whole industry. We spend too much time on cannabis and not enough on our essential services. We need to not overcomplicate the process. We need to allow the cannabis growers, the small growers, to flourish and not put overdue burdens on them. I watched an agenda item. It was an hour and 22 minutes. It had 4 items. It was a hearing regarding fees. One of them was cannabis. 78% of that meeting had to do with cannabis. And we spent 16 minutes on mental health, cultural services, and some building and planning. We are spending too much time on cannabis. We need to simplify it. And those of you in the cannabis industry, I can offend equally, hold on. Those of you in the cannabis industry, it's also not the role of government to carve a path for you to succeed in the business. You'll succeed on your own. Government just needs to do the minimum, make sure that we're safe, and make sure the community and the environment is safe as well. So.
Mr. Sackwitz?
What a sad history cannabis has been in our county. What a sad history it's been in the country, and what a sad history and legacy Ronald Reagan's insane war on drugs has been. The reason why people grow cannabis in our country, in our county, is because we're poverty stricken. We have 88,000 residents spread out over 2,400 square miles. I was talking to Supervisor Dan Hamburg about this once, why he grows cannabis, why any of us do. He said because half of our county residents are eligible for food stamps. A third of our county residents are eligible for Medi-Cal. People grow cannabis because that's the only way they can feed their families. Make it legal, get right with those legacy farmers. This is a sad, sad history. I looked at this attaché case, this little souvenir that the DEA left behind. Marijuana eradication suppression program included that asset forfeiture and all those unreasonable arrests, convictions for which cannabis farmers need to be brought back to the table. We need expungements, we need pardons, and we need a path back to legality.
Mr. Green?
Well, going back to the question of does it change the image or does it change our image? It's difficult to see the forest from the trees because we live here, but we are all a part of that problem. As Mr. McGordy referenced, we don't treat cultivators, we don't treat growers like agricultural farmers, and I think that needs to change. John Kennedy makes a valid point. We spend a lot of time on cannabis at County Board of Supervisors meetings. The ordinances need to be simplified. There's roadblocks here. Is it too high upfront costs? Are they stuck in opt-out zones? Are the ordinances too restrictive for growers to scale back and make a profit? The county's done all this. The county's made these ordinances. They're the ones making the hoops that everybody has to jump through. So we all have to look at ourselves and we have to look at this industry as a fledgling industry. Yes, we're going to make mistakes. We need to right the ship and get this done to change our image and make sure we're in line with everybody else.
All right, next question, starting with Mr. Kennedy. What should the county do? What role should the county play? What can it do to address the effects of climate change? Pretty big question, but
That's a pretty good question. Thanks for asking me first.
there's several, the subject of interest.
I yield my time. Okay, so I trust scientists. I'm not an anti-climate change guy. What we can do at the local level, I don't know. I don't know what we can do. I know that we've created an advisory committee, and there's 15 people on it, and it's actually some pretty good information. There are some smart people on that committee. I would support any of the advice, any advice that comes from the committee that would actually positively affect the climate, as long as it's within our budget. That's a big thing. I don't want to see us chip away at some other essential services, and I know that I just keep saying this essential service thing to address that, but I think it's a very serious situation, and I really don't know how you can positively affect it on a local level, but I'd like to hear it, and I'd like to learn and support any efforts if it's affordable.
Mr. Sackwitz.
Yes, we do have the Climate Change Advisory Committee, Initially, I was reluctant about expanding county government because I think if you're going to create a commission or a committee on one subject, the argument could be made for having a commission on women, a commission on Native Americans, a commission on LGBT rights, a commission on a lot of things. But that said, 15 good people are in place. But the state also has a whole raft of legislation that needs to be enforced. Finally, I would come back to Measure V. What is the number one reason we have these crazy wildfires? We have all this dead standing timber due to hack and squirt. I'm all in favor of the county litigating for Measure V. It needs to be enforced. I realize if we lose the case, we'll have to pay Redwood Forest Products legal bills, but it's the will of the people to have voted in Measure V. We have a lot of fuel over our forest because of all this hack and squirt. We need to enforce or try to enforce Measure V. Thank you.
Mr. Green?
John's baiting the hook a little bit there. I hope somebody does specifically ask about Measure V, but I'm going to go back to the original question, which was the Climate Action Advisory Committee. I commend the board for forming it. Obviously, climate change is here. I don't think that's for much of a debate. What's changing in Mendocino County? Air, wind patterns. We have to think about our water resource management, soil content. It's really going to affect the agricultural community. However, this must stay at an advisory level. The county is only paying $7,500 currently to establish this committee. I don't think the county can afford a new expenditure. What Mr. Kennedy had alluded to is essential services. We have a bunch of high priorities right now. Crumbling communication system, an unreliable ambulance service, just to name two. Those issues need to be tackled first before we expand the Climate Action Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Mr. McGordy?
So, I've been in the position of having worked on climate change and addressing it as a professional at the University of California for about the last 10 years specifically. And the good news is we're actually doing a lot of good things here in Mendocino County that you don't even realize. Primarily, we're sequestering carbon through the growth of trees. And keeping our forest healthy is something that's really, really important. It's going to be a challenge because besides hack and squirt, there's also sudden oak death that's killing trees at an alarming rate. The same species that they're trying to pull out, trying to shift the forests into fewer trees that grow bigger and larger because at age 150 to 200 years old, redwood trees really sequester a lot of carbon. So that's a really desirable thing. But also areas like our riparian forests and our oak woodlands do the same thing. I've been really active in sequestering carbon in soil, the Healthy Soils program, and how are we going to afford all this? Well, there are a lot of programs and grants going on through like the Resource Conservation District and Natural Resource Conservation Service that are going to help growers address it, so we're not going to have to pay our way.
Thank you. All right, next question, Measure V. How does it follow Mr. Sakowitz?
You know,
Whatever, but you support Measure V and you support enforcing.
Of course. Yes, yes, and yes. I was listening to the KCYX recording audio record of the debate on the coast between Dan Jurdy and Wendy Peters. And I agree with Mr. Peters. It's the will of the people. We voted it in. Was it a defective ordinance to begin with? Was it a defective ballot measure? I don't know. I'm not an attorney. But it has been voted in by the people. And it's our responsibility, ethical and moral, as supervisors, to uphold the will of the people. The case needs to be litigated. Who knows? It might be a negotiated solution at the end. But the will of the people, nothing is more important than the will of the people.
Mr. Green?
Well, I'm disappointed. Democracy's being averted. Nothing erodes the public's trust faster than having a measure be put on the ballot, having it passed, and having said measure not enforced. And that's exactly what's happening. The California Attorney General has not commented adequately to give Mendocino County the confidence it needs to go out and enforce Measure V. That's what's happening. Now, there's nothing about this that doesn't stink. Leaving dead trees standing is a fire hazard, no doubt about it. Democracy is not being served as we expect it to be. The state of California is going to have to step in to resolve this unless the county and Mendocino Redwood Company come to some sort of agreement.
But if this goes to court, this will be a huge financial impact on the county. And this is probably where I disagree with Mr. Sakowitz. If it goes to court, I think a lot more discussion needs to happen before we go down this road because it will affect the entire county. And I think discussion with county council and the other board of supervisors should remain open about it. Thank you.
Mr. McGorty?
I kind of agree with what everyone said, is the will of the people is passed. Now you gotta figure out how we're gonna make it work. So, Ted Williams especially, he's the one who really is a proponent of this, and he sees it as a public safety issue. We need to find a way. If we can't find a way, then we have to look at compromise. If we can't find a compromise, we're gonna have to go to a lawsuit. So one way or the other, we need to process through this measure and make sure that we are honoring the electorate and what they want.
Mr. Kennedy?
I've been wrangling with myself, listening to determine if I'm going to say what I wanted to say.
Please say it.
But I'm going to say it. So, Measure D was voted on by the people. It passed. It should continue, just like everyone said. I wasn't a big supporter of Measure D, and here's why. I wasn't convinced. I wasn't convinced with the campaign material out there during that time. I actually was, and it doesn't mean I'm right. I'm not a scientist. Okay. But I was, I'm a former firefighter. I've been on multiple strike teams. I've run strike teams. I know that the fear campaign that was on the Measure D regarding danger to firefighters was pure BS, because that's not what happens. That's what messed me up in the head on that measure, okay? But it was voted on. We need to do whatever we can to make sure that it's implemented. So I agreed to implement it. I wasn't a big supporter for some of the reasons I said.
Next question, starting with Mr. Green. Are you in support of lethal methods to be used by ranchers to protect livestock? Why or why not?
Okay, well, I've spoken in front of the board about this before. I recognize the importance of public safety. Having a contract with Fish and Wildlife is important for public safety, hunting down rabid animals and making sure our safety is taken care of. However, to use this contract to kill predators to create an economic advantage with your tax dollars for a small group, I find that wrong. I see that as a subsidy and should be avoided. I want to see the county adopt a non-lethal program that's based on science and has been proven to work in other counties. And I certainly commend the board. They voted recently to use the county website to promote non-lethal strategies to best avoid conflicts with wildlife.
Mr. Gordon?
I spent a lot of time talking with people who raise livestock, and along with my friends who love wildlife. So this is really a tough one for us to figure out. My conclusion was that the place to start is with non-lethal methods and everything we can do to prevent injury to our pets and livestock are things that we want to do. Nobody wants to kill wild animals. I've got coyotes that live around me. We live a peaceful coexistence because I grow grapes. There's a cat missing I'd like to know more about. But in general, we get along pretty good. And the problem comes in when you have valuable livestock or valuable pets that are injured, who are you going to call? And there reaches a point where you have to go beyond non-lethal methods. So I do support a contract with Wildlife Services. It doesn't mean an open war on wildlife. It means having people who really know the business come in when you have a problem that just can't be solved. Plus, they spend most of their time actually getting rid of skunks, opossums, and raccoons under your house.
Mr. Kennedy?
So the board just recently voted to go ahead and certify the EIR. The EIR was part of the settlement agreement back in 2016 that caused a suspension of using the IWDM program. So what the board did was basically do exactly what the settlement agreement told them to do, was to do an EIR, certify it. Some folks were convinced that EIR had some flaws in it, and some weren't. I think, like probably most people, I've grown up with ranchers. I used to milk cows before high school, at 4:30 in the morning before I go to high school. I've been around that industry quite a bit. Most don't really want to kill animals. Some of them are in the living, make a living doing that, but I believe that the non-lethal methods is the preferred method by most people. I think that's still what we do. I support I support an agreement, I support the program, but making sure we determine if it's supposed to be lethal, if that's a last resort.
Mr. Chadwick?
You know, we have a candidates forum coming up in the city of 10,000 Buddhists, I think, February 9th.
Candidates forum?
Candidates forum? And I can't wait for this question to be asked, because my answer is simple. All life is sacred. As a Buddhist, as a student of Buddhism, as someone who taught at the City of 10,000 Buddhist School of Developing Virtue and Instilling Goodness, all life is sacred. The Coyotes were here before we were. Ukiah was known as Coyote Valley. Shotokai loosely translates as Coyote Valley. They're part of our heritage, they're part of our history, they're part of our ecosystem. That said, all life is sacred.
All right. Let's begin here. Here's a question of generators, starting with Mr. McGordy. District 1 has much ag and forest land. The general plan requires that it be protected, yet the general plan, housing element, and state law requires that housing be built. How would you approach meeting both these mandates?
So we have the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Committee, which I'm a member of, that is part of the county's purveyance, and I support using the Williamson Act and land trusts for preserving agricultural land. A lot of the land that's around Ukiah is not buildable anyway, because it's in a floodway and it goes underwater, and people unfortunately enough to live in Oak Manor in 2005 got a rude awakening because they didn't realize that, and that night the waters came up and flooded their property. So that's kind of the first issue we want to do, is protect ag land where we can, and some of it's going to be protected just by virtue of where it is. I also believe in smart growth, where we infill and go to the places where there's already infrastructure or already have zoning for building. And I think that's also an important way for us to meet our housing supply. There's close to 70 acres inside of the city limits of Ukiah that could be infilled, and I support building on those places first before we look to additional land, ag land to build on.
Mr. Kennedy?
That question was specific to District 1, but we're going to talk about the whole countywide. The housing element, there are provisions in the housing element that the county is supposed to develop a certain amount of housing, and I don't remember all the formulas regarding, but I support protecting the Williamson Act. I support protecting open land. I also somewhat support the smart growth as well. The rules in the general plan that require us to build homes, it doesn't force you to build homes despite the unavailability of land to do it. So I support all efforts for the county to work with things like the Ukiah Sanitation District to make it easier and less and more affordable to go ahead and build the housing necessary to satisfy the needs of our general plan.
Mr. Secretary?
There are a lot of options. Community land trusts have been mentioned. They were also mentioned again in the candidates debate on the coast. Community land trust, of course, being a nonprofit community-based organization to ensure the community stewardship of a piece of land. But you can also develop within certain parameters on community land trusts, and the homeowners, the respective homeowners, enter into certain long-term renewable leases instead of a traditional sale. I think that's a creative solution. I think we need more Class K housing in Mendocino County. These are permits for building from the Building and Planning Department for the construction of residences that are owner-built in rural areas, low-density areas. And I think the assessor's office could be providing more homestead exemptions for tax relief to these same properties.
Mr. Green?
Well, of course, we need to honor the Williamson Act and all land trusts. However, the housing element says we need 1,845 new housing units by the year 2027. We have actually 2 new projects ready to go, one on the north end of town, one on the south end of town. The county and the city need to come to some sort of agreement, a tax sharing agreement. The fill-in idea is also important to comprehend and understand and exercise. It's going to be a case-by-case basis. I don't think anyone here wants to disturb the natural beauty and the small town charm that is the main reason why we live here. But certainly, to expand growth, promote industry, we need housing. And I think, again, it's going to have to be on a case-by-case basis to not disturb what we truly love about where we live.
We're getting close here. This question, I think, is a good one. I'm going to have a 2-part question. I'm going to shorten it asking the question. The first part of it is, to confirm, if you do, what constitutes adverse childhood experiences and what is the significance of those. The real question here is the percentage of children in Mendocino County who have experienced 2 or more ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, is 31%, which is nearly twice the state level of 17%. What specific actions would you take, if you were on the board, to change this?
My priorities as a county supervisor before and going forward, children, seniors, physically and mentally incapable. This falls into the children. I was a child with adverse childhood experiences. Statistically, I shouldn't have succeeded in half of what I do. All my failures, though, come natural. I do this job for the children. I'm familiar with the statistics and the consequences children have when they get older from their ACEs. It breaks my heart, and I'm glad I only have a minute because I'm a big baby and I'm almost over. But that is one of my top priorities, and we will do whatever we have to do to make sure that we cover our children.
Mr. Secowitz?
Mental health, mental illness, and alcoholism and addiction drives child abuse. So it all comes back to what is the job that we're doing with adults. That said, Redwood Community Services started out as Redwood Children's Services, and they probably did a very good job with children. They attempted to transition to adult services, and I think that's where we've had some problems with the failure of services. They get $20 million a year, they get millions more in Medi-Cal billings. The question is, will they submit to an independent financial audit and a study on outcomes, mental health outcomes? Again, we need to protect the children by preventing abuse in the first place. And the way to do that is by working with the parents, by working with adults on mental health services and addiction and alcohol services, rehab services.
Mr. Green?
I think it comes back to Measure B as well. ACEs stem from parental abuse. Substance abuse disorders, we don't have facilities here to properly treat these sort of issues that cause adverse childhood experiences. So as a member of the County Board of Supervisors, we need to make sure that Measure B and Health and Human Services are reaching out and understanding what these issues are and making sure that Measure B fulfills its promise to get those facilities built.
Mr. Gordon?
I'm going to take a slightly different tack. Another really driving force to this is poverty, which is something that our region has a big issue with. And building financial capacity and living wages is something that's really important as well. I agree with all of you on the mental health issues, but why are people self-medicating? It's because they're disappointed with how they live in some cases. Sometimes it's mental illness. We need to do a little bit better as a community to be able to support people to live well here. And it includes things like housing, jobs, and all the stuff that politicians talk about. And, you know, it's going to take all of us, not just the Board of Supervisors. They're not that powerful. They're not that good, I can assure you. And it really, it takes some visioning and planning, which is something Mendocino County resists sometimes. We don't have a strategic plan, which is very strange for a $300 million budget. It's something that I would insist on and think is very important. And they're all interrelated. Everything is interrelated. That's how life is.
Okay. All right, we're ready for closing statements. 1 minute. And I'm going to start at the other end. Tom, starting with Mr. Sackler.
1 minute.
1 minute for your closing remarks.
Want to thank you for coming tonight. Again, want to thank the sponsors. You can find out more about my candidacy at johnsakowitz.org. I want to say that the late Phil Baldwin has inspired much of my campaign. He was a friend and a political mentor. On the national scene, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is also an inspiration. I don't see big endorsements or big money. I don't do a lot of mailings or bumper stickers or signs. I seek to represent the people, each one of you. I seek to be responsible to you and only to you. I love this county. I raised 2 boys in this county, 2 boys who both got congressional nominations to federal military academies. It's a great place to live, and I work to continue to make it a great place to live. Thank you.
Mr. Green.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. What you've heard are 4 different, albeit similar perspectives on the most pressing issue of our community. What you, the voter, must now decide is who you connect with, who shares your visions, and who's going to work passionately and vigorously to make those visions a reality. One person can make a difference, and everyone should try. We have an intelligent, compassionate citizenry working hard on these issues, and I'm proud to be one of them. We have an agricultural community filled with deserved pride, working hard to put food and wine on our tables every day, and I'd like very much to be an advocate for them. I want to represent all citizens of Mendocino County. I want to be instrumental in building a bridge between the government and the government. And on March 3rd, you'll have a decision to make, and I'm asking you to join me in building Mendocino County's future. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Mr. McGarty.
It's pretty clear Mendocino County is going to have a really challenging next 4 years. And I can also assure you that if you're expecting Sacramento or Washington, D.C. to come and save us, it's not going to happen. So it's up to everybody in this room. And it's also going to be up to somebody who has experience in leadership, problem solving, doing research, gathering data, analyzing it, explaining it, planning, working with others, and that's me. That's what I do. I also have a cheerful disposition and a sunny personality. And I think it would be fun. You know, it'd be fun to work with me, and I've done really well. Over the years, our office has always been a great team, and you know, I'm also, I just want to say, this is a really nice group of candidates, and there's a lot of nastiness in politics, and I'm glad that that's not present here, and it's a pleasure working with you guys.
Mr. Kennedy.
I'm just going to bask in that. Thank you again for showing up tonight. I'm sure there are better things to do on a Tuesday night. I want to share with you why I think I've done a good, one of the reasons I have done a good job as a supervisor and why I will. Normally I share something in common with most people. I've been fortunate enough to experience quite a bit in my life and a lot of experiences, and I understand the consequences of decisions, bad and good. When we talk about building houses and dealing with building and planning, I understand that. I've pulled more than a dozen building permits just this last year, helping people with fire recovery. When we talk about creating jobs, I've created jobs out of thin air. When we talk about fire and EMS, I was a firefighter. I've flipped pancakes. I've saved lives. I've lost lives. I've fought fire. I have rolled up onto a call where I found one of my best friends deceased. I delivered a baby in Spanish. When we talk about education, public schools, affordable housing, I get it. When we talk about who you want to fiercely advocate for the 90,000 lives in Mendocino County, I'm that person. Thank you.